Billionaire denies dying ex-wife treatment. 3 years later he saw her with twins. Love dies twice. First, when someone decides you're not worth saving. And again, when you realize you survived anyway, and they never deserve to know. Before we dive into this story, I need just one thing from you. Hit that subscribe button right now, and drop "present" in the comments so I know you're here with me. Why? Because this channel is built for people who believe actions have consequences, that redemption isn't automatic, and that some betrayals cut so deep they echo for generations. If that's you, you're in the right place. Now, let's talk about the night love became a business decision. Dr. Gina Williams' hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the hospital bed, staring at the divorce papers spread across the sterile white sheets. The pen felt impossibly heavy. 3 years of marriage reduced to signatures and legal clauses. She'd left the consultation room 30 minutes ago, the doctor's words still echoing in her skull. Without the experimental treatment, Mrs. Greer, I'd estimate 6 months. Maybe less. The treatment her husband controlled. The treatment Edison Greer, tech billionaire, hospital board chairman, the man who'd promised to love her in sickness and health, had personally denied authorization for. The room felt suffocating despite being wide and temperature-controlled. October rain hammered against the window, blurring the city lights into watercolor streaks. She'd been admitted here 3 times in the past month. Each time, the prognosis grew darker. Each time, Edison's visits grew shorter. This news couldn't wait, the lawyer had said when he arrived with the papers. Mr. Greer wanted this handled quickly. Quietly. Before it became complicated. Gina's free hand moved instinctively to her stomach, a gesture so small she barely registered it. The nausea she'd attributed to medication. The fatigue she'd blamed on her failing heart. The secret she'd discovered just yesterday, one she would now take to her grave. She signed her name. The lawyer gathered the papers with practiced efficiency, offering condolences that sounded rehearsed. She barely heard him leave. The room sat silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Strange. Edison usually stayed when he visited the hospital, even if just to make calls in the corner. Said it made the place feel less cold when she was afraid. But tonight, he hadn't come at all. Gina's tears fell onto the hospital bracelet still circling her wrist. Her married name printed in block letters, Gina Greer. A name that would die with her. A love that had already flatlined. What she didn't know, what Edison would never know, was that in that moment, while he celebrated the signing of divorce papers over scotch in his penthouse, 2 tiny heartbeats fluttered inside her. Fragile. Impossible. Defiant. The machines beeped steadily. The rain fell harder. And somewhere between grief and survival, Gina Williams made a choice. If he could decide she wasn't worth saving, she could decide he wasn't worth telling. But fortunes change people. And some changes can't be reversed, no matter how much money you throw at them. The boardroom on the 15th floor of Greer Medical Innovation Center smelled like leather and ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city Edison had conquered, first with code, then with capital, now with control over who lived and who waited. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, head of cardiology, stood at the head of the conference table, her tablet displaying Gina's scans in brutal clarity. The autoimmune response is accelerating. Without the neocortex protocol, she has 6 months. With it, We're looking at potential full recovery. Edison sat at the opposite end, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. Around him, 5 board members shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew who they were really discussing. Everyone pretended they didn't. The protocol isn't FDA approved, Edison said, his voice carrying that particular calm he perfected in negotiations. We're talking about experimental treatment with a 40% adverse reaction rate. We're also talking about an 85% survival rate, Dr. Okonkwo countered, her frustration barely contained. This is exactly what Neocardics was designed for. She's the perfect candidate. She's my wife. Edison's correction landed like a gavel. Which is precisely why we can't make exceptions. Imagine the optics if something goes wrong. Billionaire uses experimental drug on spouse. The lawsuits alone would. This isn't about lawsuits. The interruption came from Dr. James Chen, one of the senior researchers. This is about a woman's life. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Edison leaned forward, and suddenly the concerned husband vanished, replaced by the man who'd built an empire by never blinking first. Dr. Chen, every decision in this room affects thousands of lives. Research funding. Future trials. Investor confidence. I can't let personal emotion cloud billion-dollar decisions that impact this institution's ability to save countless others. The logic was airtight. The cruelty was invisible. Dr. Okonkwo's jaw tightened. Then let me be clear, Mr. Greer. Without intervention, Gina will die. That's not projection. That's medical certainty. Then we explore traditional treatments. Standard protocols. Edison stood, signaling the meeting's end. I want a second opinion from Johns Hopkins. Third from Mayo Clinic. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. What he meant was, we do this slowly enough that it won't be my decision anymore. The board members filed out, refusing to meet Dr. Okonkwo's eyes. She lingered, gathering her tablet with shaking hands. She loves you, she said quietly. Edison paused at the door, his back to her. I know. He walked out anyway. Gina learned about the denial the way you learn about most betrayals, accidentally, and too late to unsee it. She'd come for her weekly checkup, hoping the new medications might have bought her time. Instead, she found Dr. Okonkwo in the hallway outside the cardiology wing, arguing in hushed, furious tones with a hospital administrator. Blocked authorization himself. Cited risk management. The board voted to table the proposal indefinitely. Gina's hand found the wall for support. The nausea that had plagued her for weeks suddenly made perfect sense, and it had nothing to do with her condition. Dr. Okonkwo turned, saw her, and the expression on her face confirmed everything. Gina. He said no. It wasn't a question. The silence answered anyway. She found Edison in his private office on the 20th floor, the one with the view he'd once promised would be theirs together. Now it felt like his watchtower over a kingdom she'd never been invited to rule. He didn't look up from his laptop when she entered. You shouldn't be out of bed. You denied my treatment. His fingers paused on the keyboard. Just for a second. I requested additional consultations. There's a difference. Don't. Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. Don't insult me with corporate speak, Edison. I heard what you told the board. He finally looked at her, and for a moment, just a breath, she thought she saw regret. Then his expression smoothed into something worse than anger, patience with someone who didn't understand business. Gina, you're not thinking clearly. The experimental protocol carries significant risks. I'm dying anyway. The words tore out of her, raw and desperate. What risk matters more than that? The risk to everything we've built here. He stood, walked to the window, put physical distance between them. If something goes wrong, if there are complications, the lawsuits would destroy the research program. No more trials. No more treatments for anyone. So I die so that others might live. She laughed, a broken sound. How noble. How convenient. That's not fair. You want to talk about fair? Gina's hands clenched. Another wave of nausea hit her, stronger this time. She gripped the back of his guest chair. I stood beside you when you had nothing. I believed in you when investors laughed you out of rooms. I waited through 100-hour work weeks and missed anniversaries because I understood the vision. And I'm protecting that vision. You're protecting yourself. The truth landed between them like shattered glass. You don't want the complication of a sick wife. The burden. The weakness. I don't fit the image anymore, do I? Edison's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. That was answer enough. The nausea surged again. Gina's vision blurred at the edges. Mrs. Greer. His assistant appeared at the door, concerned. Should I call a nurse? No, Gina straightened, forcing her legs to steady. I'm leaving. She made it to the elevator. Down to the lobby. Halfway across the atrium before her knees buckled. The last thing she remembered was the cold marble floor rushing up to meet her, the echo of footsteps that didn't stop to help, and a tiny, impossible thought that whispered through the darkness. What if you're not dying alone? What if you're not dying alone? Gina woke to fluorescent lights and the steady beep of monitors. Her hospital room, the same one she'd occupied 3 times in the past month. The same pale blue walls. The same window overlooking the parking garage. The same loneliness. Different news. Dr. Okonkwo sat in the chair beside her bed, tablet in hand, expression carefully neutral. The kind of neutral that meant the conversation ahead would require courage from both of them. Your collapse was caused by severe dehydration and low blood pressure, she began. But we ran a full panel to check for complications with your heart condition. Gina's throat tightened. And? You're pregnant. Dr. Okonkwo delivered it gently, but facts don't soften just because they're spoken kindly. Approximately 8 weeks. Twins. The world tilted sideways. That's not possible. With my condition, the medications. I know. Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward. Gina, I need you to understand what this means. Your heart is already struggling. Pregnancy will put enormous additional strain on your cardiovascular system. Twin pregnancy even more so. Without the neocortex treatment, she paused, choosing words like stepping stones across a river. Your chances of carrying to term and surviving delivery are extremely low. How low? Less than 15%. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Which, Gina supposed, it was. And the babies? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. If you survive, they likely survive. But Gina, Dr. Okonkwo's professional mask cracked slightly. I have to be honest with you. The prognosis is critical. For all of you. Gina's hand moved to her stomach, a gesture that felt both foreign and ancient. Life. Growing inside her while her own was slipping away. Two tiny heartbeats fighting for survival in a body that was failing them. Does Edison know? Not from me. Doctor-patient confidentiality. But you need to tell him. This changes everything, treatment options, legal considerations. No, the word came out sharp, decisive. He doesn't need to know. Dr. Okonkwo studied her with something like understanding. Gina. He's already decided I'm not worth saving, Patricia. What difference does it make? The doctor had no answer for that. Edison arrived 2 days later with a lawyer instead of flowers. Gina had been staring out the window, watching rain streak down the glass, when she heard his footsteps. She knew his walk, the confident stride of someone who'd never been denied anything he actually wanted. He looked tired. Expensive suit perfectly tailored, hair immaculate, but shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. For a moment, she let herself imagine he'd been losing sleep over her. Then she saw the manila folder in his hand. Gina. Not sweetheart. Not love. Just her name, spoken like an agenda item. This is Richard Carr, from Morrison and Associates. The lawyer, silver-haired, kind-eyed, probably someone's beloved grandfather, offered a sympathetic smile that felt practiced. Mrs. Greer. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Edison pulled a chair to her bedside but didn't sit. Didn't touch her. Just stood there like a CEO in a hospital costume, playing the part of concerned husband while his eyes calculated exit strategies. We need to discuss some practical matters, he said. Given your condition and the prognosis, there are arrangements that should be made. For your protection. My protection. Gina tasted the irony. How thoughtful. I've had papers drawn up. He opened the folder, and she saw it, petition for dissolution of marriage in stark black letters. It releases you from any financial obligations tied to the business. Ensures you receive full medical coverage through the company insurance. Sets up a trust for any end-of-life care you might need. Translation: let me go before you become a liability I can't liquidate. You want a divorce. She said it flatly, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. I think it's best for both of us. Edison finally met her eyes, and the absence of emotion there hurt worse than cruelty would have. You'll be taken care of. The hospital will continue treatment under standard protocols. You won't want for anything. Except the one thing she'd begged him for. The one thing he could have given with a signature. The same thing he was now asking her to sign away. Mr. Carr cleared his throat gently. Mrs. Greer, I want you to know you can have your own attorney review these documents. There's no rush. Give me the pen. Gina held out her hand. Edison blinked. Gina, you should take time to give me the pen. Mr. Carr glanced at Edison, received a slight nod, and placed an expensive ballpoint in her trembling fingers. She signed her name on every flagged line. Quick, decisive, before grief could steal her resolve. The pen scratched across paper, each stroke severing another thread of a life she believed would last forever. Gina Williams, not Greer. She'd already started taking back what was hers. Edison watched without speaking. When she finished, he collected the papers with the efficiency of someone closing a business deal. Which, she supposed, was exactly what this was. "I'll have copies sent to you," he said. "If you need anything. Get out." He paused, and for a heartbeat she thought he might say something real. Something human. An apology. A goodbye. Anything to prove the man she'd loved still existed somewhere inside the billionaire. Instead, he nodded. "Take care of yourself, Gina." He left without looking back. Mr. Carr followed with a murmured condolence. The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed through her chest. Gina stared at the ceiling, willing herself not to cry. Refusing to give him tears he'd never see and wouldn't care about if he did. Her hand moved to her stomach, resting there with a tenderness she couldn't afford to feel for herself. "He doesn't know about you," she whispered to the impossible lives growing inside her. "And he never will." Because if Edison Greer could decide she wasn't worth saving, then Gina Williams could decide he wasn't worth telling. Some men didn't deserve to be fathers. Some secrets were protection, not revenge. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, something shifted. Not hope. Hope was too fragile for what she felt. But determination. A quiet, furious resolve. "I will not die in this room. I will not let him win." The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. 2 hearts now, or 4, depending on how you counted. All of them fighting. All of them refusing to surrender. "I will not die in this room. I will not let him win." 3 weeks later, Gina Williams disappeared. Not dramatically. Not with announcements or forwarding addresses. She simply stopped existing in the world Edison Greer occupied. Checked out of his hospital. Disconnected her phone. Left the luxury apartment whose rent he'd paid with the same impersonal efficiency he'd paid for her silence. She took 1 suitcase, her medical records, and the last shreds of her pride. The savings account she'd maintained separately, the one Edison never knew about, built from her professor's salary before she'd quit to support his ambitions, held $47,000. Enough to die with dignity. Or just enough to refuse to. Dr. Emmanuel Okafor's clinic sat in a converted warehouse in Sao Paulo, Brazil, accessible only through referrals whispered between desperate patients in online forums. No sleek glass towers. No leather boardrooms. Just determination and a retired cardiovascular specialist who'd lost his license in the States for treating people insurance companies had deemed unprofitable. "Your heart function is at 35%, he said, studying her scans with the focus of someone who still believed medicine was about healing, not revenue. "The pregnancy is suicidal. You understand this?" Gina sat across from him in a folding chair, the irony not lost on her that she traded a billionaire's resources for this. "I understand. The babies will demand more oxygen, more blood flow. Your heart cannot provide it." He looked up, his dark eyes kind but unflinching. I can try a modified version of the treatment you were denied. It is risky, painful, and I make no promises. What are my odds of surviving the pregnancy? Maybe 20%. Of the treatment working at all? 40%. Of both? He spread his hands. God decides. I just do the work. Gina thought of Edison's boardroom, where decisions about her life had been calculated in percentages and liability. Where her survival had been weighed against optics and investor confidence. When do we start? Dr. Okafor smiled, slow and sad. Now. Before you are too sick to fight. The treatment was agony. Not the sanitized, managed pain of American hospitals where nurses asked you to rate your suffering on a scale of 1 to 10. This was medieval, bone-deep, relentless, the kind of pain that made you understand why people gave up. Gina didn't give up. She vomited into buckets beside the cot in Dr. Okafor's clinic. Shook through fevers that should have killed her. Felt her heart stutter and restart under the assault of experimental drugs mixed in conditions that would have horrified medical boards. Her savings drained at $3,000 per week. Dr. Okafor charged what he needed to keep the clinic running, nothing more. Still, she watched her bank account bleed out with the same inevitability as her condition. Pride? She swallowed it. Contacted former colleagues. Borrowed money with promises she wasn't sure she'd live to keep. Sold jewelry, her laptop, everything that could be converted to treatment. At 12 weeks pregnant, her heart function dropped to 28%. Dr. Okafor considered stopping. At 16 weeks, it climbed to 31%. A miracle, or statistical anomaly. Neither cared about the distinction. At 20 weeks, the ultrasound revealed what they'd suspected, twins. Two perfect, impossible lives stubbornly refusing to acknowledge their host body was dying. I have never seen this, the ultrasound technician whispered in Portuguese. Never. Gina placed her hand over the swell of her belly, finally visible now, unmistakable proof of the secret she'd protected. They're fighters. Like their mother, Dr. Okafor said. Month 5 brought complications. Preeclampsia. Arrhythmia. A midnight rush where Dr. Okafor worked with hands that never trembled even as Gina's body tried to surrender. Stay with me, he commanded, and she didn't know if he was talking to her or the babies or God himself. She stayed. Month 6 brought stability. Her heart function plateaued at 42%, not healthy, not normal, but alive. Functioning. Enough. The treatment is working, Dr. Okafor said, and for the first time since she'd collapsed in Edison's atrium, Gina let herself believe it. Month 7 brought the emotional rebirth. She sat in the clinic's small courtyard, Brazilian sun warm on her face, hands cradling her swollen belly. Somewhere in New York, Edison probably thought her dead. Had maybe grieved appropriately, a week of somber expressions, a generous donation to cardiac research in her memory. He would never know she'd survived. Would never know about the children who kicked against her ribs with his stubbornness and her determination. I will never beg again, she whispered to them. To herself. To the woman she was becoming. Not for treatment. Not for love. Not for anything. It felt like a vow. Like baptism through fire. The twins were born on a February morning, 3 weeks early, in a teaching hospital Dr. Okafor had privileges at. Emergency C-section. Her heart rate spiking dangerously. Machines screaming. Doctors shouting in Portuguese while she floated somewhere between consciousness and surrender. Then, crying. 2 distinct voices, furious at being forced into the cold world. Menina e menino, a nurse said, smiling. Girl and boy. They placed them on her chest, tiny and perfect and utterly unaware they'd been sentenced to death before they'd even existed. Edison's eyes stared back at her from 2 miniature faces. His jawline. His expression when determined. But they were hers. Only hers. You will never feel unwanted, Gina whispered, tears streaming freely now. Never unloved. Never disposable. I promise you. Her heart monitor beeped steadily, 52% function, the nurse would tell her later. Better than before pregnancy. Another impossibility in a year of them. Dr. Okafor appeared beside her, exhausted and grinning. What will you name them? Gina looked down at her children, her proof, her purpose, her revenge against death itself. Survivors, she said. I'll name them survivors. Outside the window, the Sao Paulo skyline glittered with morning light. A new city. A new life. A future Edison Greer would never control. The woman who'd signed divorce papers believing she'd be dead in months held her twins close and felt something she hadn't felt since the day she'd learned her diagnosis. Power. Not over boardrooms or billions. Over her own story. Over who got to be part of it. Edison had chosen convenience over compassion. She'd chosen survival over surrender. And 3 years from now, when fate brought them face to face again, he would learn which choice mattered more. And 3 years from now, when fate brought them face to face again, he would learn which choice mattered more. New York City, 3 years later. Edison Greer stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city pulse with evening lights. 37 floors below, people fought traffic, chased deadlines, lived lives that mattered to someone. Up here, everything was quiet. Clean. Empty. His reflection stared back at him, older than 39 should look, successful by every metric that counted in boardrooms, hollow in ways balance sheets never measured. The Wall Street Journal sat on his desk, his face on the cover. Greer Medical Innovation Center expands to 6 countries. Billionaire's empire saves thousands. Thousands. Just never the one who'd needed it most. He'd stopped thinking about Gina daily sometime in year 2. Weekly by year 3. Now she surfaced only in unguarded moments, the ghost of her laugh in the elevator, the memory of her reading in the corner of this office back when it had been theirs, not his. He'd never confirmed her death. Never asked. The hospital had settled the insurance quietly, and his assistant had handled the paperwork. Cleaner that way. Less painful. Or so he'd told himself. Mr. Greer. His current assistant, the 4th since Gina, appeared at the door. The keynote speech for the Global Medical Innovation Summit is finalized. You're scheduled for 10 a.m. on Friday. Edison nodded without turning. Send it to my tablet. The summit. His crowning achievement. Medical leaders from 40 countries gathering at the Greer Innovation Center to discuss the future of experimental treatments, breakthrough technologies, life-saving protocols. The irony tasted like ash. Also, the board wants to discuss the NeoCardiacs trial results. The FDA is requesting additional data before final approval. Schedule it for Monday. NeoCardiacs. The treatment that now had a 91% success rate. The protocol that had saved 217 lives in clinical trials. The drug he denied his wife because the risk seemed too great. The drug that would make him another $1 billion. Edison stared at his reflection until it blurred. More money. Less meaning. A pattern he'd perfected. Somewhere out there, Gina's grave existed. He'd never visited. Didn't know where she was buried. Had told himself it was respect for her privacy, knowing it was cowardice. Will that be all, Mr. Greer? Yes. Thank you. The assistant left. The office fell silent again. And Edison Greer, master of a medical empire built on saving lives, stood alone in a kingdom he'd traded his soul to rule. Sao Paulo Medical District, same week. Dr. Gina Williams buttoned her white coat with practiced efficiency, checking her reflection in the staff lounge mirror. Professional. Composed. No trace of the woman who'd nearly died on a clinic cot 3 years ago. Her heart function held steady at 68%, a medical miracle that still made Dr. Okafor shake his head in wonder. She'd returned to medicine 6 months after the twins were born, starting as a resident again, rebuilding from nothing. Now she was attending physician in cardiology at Hospital Syrio-Libanese, one of South America's premier cardiac centers. Published researcher. Guest lecturer. The woman who'd survived the unsurvivable and refused to waste the second chance. Mommy. 2 voices chorused from the doorway. Gina turned to see her twins, Lila and Lucas, 3 years old and entirely unaware they'd been born against astronomical odds. Lila clutched a stuffed elephant. Lucas held a toy stethoscope, already mimicking his mother's profession. Dr. Okafor stood behind them, grinning. He'd become more than her doctor, surrogate grandfather, trusted friend, the reason she still believed some people chose compassion over convenience. They insisted on seeing you before daycare, he said. Gina crouched, pulling them both into her arms. Lila's curls, wild like hers, tickled her cheek. Lucas's eyes, Edison's eyes, though she never said it aloud, studied her with serious intensity. Are you saving people today? Lucas asked. Always, Gina promised. Can we help? Lila wanted to know. When you're bigger. She kissed their foreheads, breathing in the innocent sweetness of them. For now, you help by being brave and kind. Deal. Deal. They chorused. Dr. Okafor ushered them out, but paused at the door. Gina, did you see the email about the New York conference? Her hands stilled on her coat buttons. I saw it. The Global Medical Innovation Summit. Every major cardiac researcher will be there, including the panel on experimental treatments for autoimmune conditions. He studied her carefully. You should present your case. What we accomplished. It could change protocols worldwide. Emmanuel. Your survival defied every statistic. The modified NeoCardiacs treatment worked when their FDA-approved version was denied to you. His voice gentled. People should know. Patients should know there are doctors who treat people, not profit margins. Gina stared at the acceptance email on her phone. Greer Medical Innovation Center emblazoned across the header. Edison's Empire. Edison's Conference. Edison's Building. 3 years since she disappeared. 3 years since he believed her dead. 3 years of building a life where he didn't exist. He'll be there, she said quietly. I know. The twins look exactly like their father. I know that too. Dr. Okafor crossed his arms. The question is, are you hiding to protect them, or to protect yourself? The words landed like a diagnosis. Accurate. Uncomfortable. Undeniable. Gina looked at her reflection again. Not the dying woman who'd signed divorce papers. Not the desperate patient who'd begged for treatment. The physician who'd clawed her way back from death and refused to apologize for surviving. When is it? Next Friday. They're offering to cover travel and accommodation for featured researchers. Next Friday. 7 days to decide if she was ready to face the man who'd chosen her death over his inconvenience. To show him the children he'd never known existed. To stand in his hospital as living proof that some people were worth saving, whether he believed it or not. Her phone buzzed. A photo from daycare, Lila and Lucas building blocks together, laughing at something only they understood. His eyes in their faces. Her determination in their stubborn focus. Evidence. Truth. Justice wearing the faces of 3-year-olds. Accept the invitation, Gina said. I'll present our case study. Dr. Okafor's smile was equal parts pride and concern. Are you sure? No, she looked at her children's photo one more time. But they deserve to exist in the world without shame. And he deserves to know what he threw away. 7 days later, Greer Medical Innovation Center. The past doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself or ask permission. It waits in corridors you thought you'd never walk again. In buildings bearing the names of people who erased you. In the exact moment you turn a corner carrying your children's hands and come face to face with the ghost of a future you survived instead of surrendered to. The past waits. And on a Friday morning in October, 3 years after a woman signed her own death warrant in a hospital bed, fate proved it had a sense of irony after all. And on a Friday morning in October, 3 years after a woman signed her own death warrant in a hospital bed, fate proved it had a sense of irony after all. Edison's keynote had gone perfectly. Standing ovation. 3 interview requests. A pharmaceutical CEO wanting to discuss partnership over lunch. He delivered his speech on the future of compassionate medicine without a trace of irony, and the audience had eaten it up. Now he walked the corridors of his flagship hospital, accepting congratulations, shaking hands, playing the role he'd perfected, visionary humanitarian billionaire who definitely didn't let his wife die to avoid complications. The cardiology wing stretched before him, all glass and steel and cutting-edge technology purchased with money that could have saved one woman but saved his reputation instead. He turned the corner toward the conference halls, mind already on the afternoon panel, when the world stopped. Not dramatically. Not with sound or fury. Just stopped. Because there, 30 feet away, standing beside a presentation board in a white physician's coat, was a ghost. Gina. Not dying. Not dead. Not even diminished. Alive. Edison's brain stuttered through impossible calculations. Hallucination. Coincidence. Someone who looked like her. Had to be. Because Gina Williams had been dying 3 years ago, and he'd signed papers, and there'd been insurance settlements, and... She turned. Their eyes met across the corridor, and the recognition hit him like cardiac arrest. It's her. The Gina he'd known had been soft, fading, defeated. This woman stood with the posture of someone who'd been to war and came back carrying battle scars as credentials. Her natural curls framed a face that had sharpened with survival. Her eyes held something he'd never seen there before. Not love. Not even anger. Power. Edison's feet moved without permission, carrying him forward through the small crowd of conference attendees. His heart hammered against his ribs, appropriate, given the cardiology setting. Gina. His voice came out strangled, disbelieving. She didn't respond immediately. Just watched him approach with the clinical assessment of a physician evaluating symptoms. Then he saw them. 2 children, maybe 3 years old, standing on either side of her. Holding her hands. Watching him with identical expressions of curious wariness. The girl had Gina's curls, wild and beautiful. But her eyes. The boy's face was softer, rounder with youth. But his jawline, the set of his mouth. Edison's world tilted violently sideways. No. The boy had his eyes. Exactly his eyes. The unusual gray-green that he'd inherited from his father and had never seen in another living person except his own reflection. Both children had his coloring. His bone structure emerging through toddler softness. His expression when concentrating, that slight furrow between the brows. His mind performed the math it should have done 3 years ago, timeline. Divorce. Hospital bed. Her hand moving to her stomach in that gesture he'd thought was pain. Oh God. Edison couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't reconcile the dead wife he'd buried in his conscience with this living woman. Couldn't process the children who wore his genetics like accusations. Gina's expression didn't change. Calm. Controlled. The kind of professional composure that came from years of delivering devastating news to patients. Dr. Williams, she corrected, her voice steady. I'm presenting at the experimental treatment panel this afternoon. Case study on modified neocortex protocols in high-risk pregnancy. Each word landed like a scalpel cut. Precise. Clinical. Deliberately impersonal. Edison's eyes dropped to the twins again. The girl clutched a small stuffed elephant. The boy held what looked like a toy medical kit. Both watched him with the unfiltered honesty only children possessed. These are. He couldn't say it. Couldn't make the accusation that would shatter whatever remained of his carefully constructed denial. My children. Gina's grip on their hands tightened almost imperceptibly. Lila and Lucas. My children, not ours. Not yours. Mommy, who is he? The boy, Lucas, asked in Portuguese accented English. Gina crouched to their level, her white coat pooling around her. Someone Mama used to know. A long time ago. Used to know, past tense. Buried and done. Edison felt something crack in his chest. Not his heart, that required caring about something more than yourself. This was different. This was the sound of consequences arriving after you'd stopped expecting them. Gina, his voice broke. I thought you were dead. I was supposed to be. She stood, placing herself between him and the children in a gesture that looked casual but felt protective. The prognosis was terminal. Remember? The corridor around them had gone quiet. Other conference attendees sensing drama, stepping back to give them space or maybe to watch the collision. Edison's hands shook. He shoved them into his pockets. The treatment, how did you survive? Gina's smile was sharp enough to cut. I found a doctor who believed some lives were worth the risk. Who chose medicine over optics? Who didn't weigh my survival against quarterly earnings? Each sentence was a verdict. Each word, evidence. I looked for you, Edison lied, then realized immediately she knew it was a lie. I assumed the hospital. The hospital you controlled. Her voice never rose above professional volume, but something in it made him flinch. The same hospital that denied me treatment. Yes. I chose not to die there. Lucas tugged on her coat. Mama, you said no sad talk at work. Gina's expression transformed instantly, softening, warming, becoming someone Edison didn't recognize. You're right, May Wilmore. No sad talk. She looked back at Edison, and the warmth vanished like a door closing. Mr. Greer, if you'll excuse us, we have a presentation to prepare for. I'm sure you understand the importance of proper preparation. Her eyes held his. Some opportunities only come once. The dismissal was absolute. Professional. Devastating. Edison stood frozen as she turned, guiding the twins, his twins, they had to be, down the corridor toward the conference rooms. Other attendees parted for her, some recognizing the tension, others simply responding to her physician's authority. He watched them walk away. Watched Lila look back once, curious. Watched Lucas skip beside his mother, completely unaware he was walking away from a father who'd never known he existed. Gina. His voice came out broken, desperate. Not a call. A plea. She paused. Didn't turn. Just stopped, her back straight in that white coat that declared her a doctor, a colleague, an equal in this building he'd built. Then she looked over her shoulder, and her expression held nothing. Not anger. Not love. Not even hate. Just the cool, professional assessment of a physician who'd seen death up close and decided it wasn't her time. It's Dr. Williams, Mr. Greer. Each word perfectly enunciated. Perfectly distant. We're not on a first-name basis anymore. She walked away. And Edison Greer, billionaire, humanitarian, the man who'd built an empire on saving lives, stood alone in the corridor of his own hospital, drowning in the sudden, catastrophic understanding of what he'd lost. Not just a wife. Not just a marriage. 3 lives. 3 chances at redemption. 3 years of fatherhood that had existed without him because he'd decided one woman wasn't worth the inconvenience. The past hadn't knocked. It had walked right past him, holding the hands of children who had his eyes and would never call him father. The past hadn't knocked. It had walked right past him, holding the hands of children who had his eyes and would never call him father. Edison found her in the empty presentation room 2 hours later. Not by accident. He'd had his assistant track her schedule, locate which conference room she'd reserved, clear the surrounding area. The kind of corporate power play he'd perfected over years of getting exactly what he wanted. Except Gina wasn't a business deal. And power didn't work on someone who'd already lost everything you could threaten to take. She stood at the podium, reviewing slides on a laptop. Medical images, data charts, survival statistics. Professional. Focused. Completely unsurprised when he entered. "I cleared the next hour," Edison said, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." Gina didn't look up from her screen. "You need to talk. I need to prepare my presentation. These aren't the same thing." "Gina, please." "Dr. Williams." She finally looked at him, and the correction landed like a slap. "We're colleagues at a professional conference, Mr. Greer. Let's maintain appropriate boundaries." Edison moved closer, desperation overriding the careful control he usually maintained. "Those children. Lila and Lucas. They're mine." It wasn't a question. But he needed her to say it. Needed confirmation for what his DNA screamed at him every time he'd looked at their faces. Gina's expression didn't change. "They're mine. I carried them. Birthed them. Raised them. The genetic component is irrelevant." "That's not," Edison's hands clenched. "You know what I mean. Biologically. They're my children." "Are they?" Gina closed her laptop with deliberate care. "Tell me, Mr. Greer, what makes someone a father? DNA? Or showing up? Caring? Choosing their life over your convenience?" The words hit like physical blows. "I didn't know," Edison said, hearing the weakness in his own voice. "If I'd known you were pregnant." "You would have what?" Gina's calm cracked, revealing the fury beneath. "Authorized treatment. Suddenly decided I was worth saving. Let me carry your heirs instead of signing divorce papers while I was dying." "Yes. God, yes, of course. So my life only mattered if I was useful to you." She stepped out from behind the podium, and suddenly the power dynamic reversed. She wasn't the dying wife anymore. He wasn't the man in control. "If I could provide you with children. Legacy. Something valuable enough to outweigh the inconvenience. That's not fair." "Fair." Gina's laugh was sharp, brittle. "You want to discuss fair? Let me remind you of the facts, since your memory seems selective." She began ticking off points with the clinical precision of a physician presenting a case study. "Fact 1, I was diagnosed with a treatable condition. Your hospital had the experimental protocol. You controlled authorization." Edison flinched. "Fact 2, you denied treatment. Not because it was unsafe, it now has a 91% success rate. But because the optics looked bad. Because I'd become a liability to your image. I thought I was protecting the research." Fact 3, her voice cut through his excuse like a scalpel. "You divorced me from a hospital bed. Brought a lawyer instead of flowers. Left me to die alone because staying married to a dying woman was too complicated for your billion-dollar empire. Gina, I made a mistake. Fact 4, she moved closer, and Edison saw 3 years of survival in her eyes. 3 years of fighting for every breath while he'd counted money. I was 8 weeks pregnant when you handed me those papers. Already carrying twins. Already choosing to protect them even if it killed me. Edison's breath stopped. You knew. When you signed. I knew. Her voice dropped to something cold and final. I knew I was pregnant. Knew the pregnancy would make survival almost impossible. Knew I should tell you because maybe, you'd care enough about your own children to save their mother. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. But then I realized something, Gina continued. If you could let me die, you didn't deserve to know what lived inside me. You'd already proven that lives were only valuable if they served your purposes. I wouldn't subject my children to that calculus. So you disappeared. Edison's voice came out hoarse. Let me think you were dead. I was supposed to be dead. 15% survival rate, Edison. 15% chance of carrying to term and living through delivery. Those were the odds your denial created. But you survived. Not because of you. Gina's controlled fury finally broke free. I survived because a retired doctor in Brazil risked everything to treat me. Because I drained my savings and borrowed from everyone who'd ever loved me. Because I chose to fight even when fighting meant agony and bankruptcy and giving birth via emergency C-section while my heart nearly gave out. Edison felt tears burning his eyes. I would have helped. If I'd known. You did know. Her shout echoed in the empty room. You knew I was dying. You knew treatment existed. You knew I was begging you, pleading with you, and you chose board meetings over my heartbeat. I was wrong. Edison's voice broke completely. God, Gina, I was wrong. I was selfish and cruel and I've regretted it every single day since. Have you? She studied him with the detachment of a scientist examining a specimen. Did you visit my grave? Search for my body? Or did you just move on? Build your empire higher while assuming I was buried somewhere? The accuracy of it destroyed him. I'm sorry. Edison dropped to his knees, not caring how it looked, not caring about dignity or power. I'm so sorry. Please. Those children, are children, I want to know them. I want to be their father. I'll do anything. They already have everything they need. Gina's voice held no mercy. Love. Stability. A parent who chose them over convenience. You can't buy your way into that, Edison. Money doesn't fix what you broke. Then what do I do? He looked up at her, desperate. Tell me how to fix this. Gina crouched to his level, and for a moment he thought he saw softness in her eyes. Then she spoke, and he realized it wasn't softness. It was pity. You denied me life, she said quietly. I denied you fatherhood. We're even. We're not, Edison couldn't find words for the devastation. Gina, please. They deserve a father. They deserve better than a father who has to be shamed into caring. She stood, moving back to her presentation materials. You made your choice 3 years ago. I made mine. Live with it. I can't. The confession tore out of him. I can't live knowing they exist and I'm not. You've been living with worse for 3 years. Gina's voice turned clinical again. Physician delivering bad news. You've been living with letting me die. Compared to that, what's a little paternal regret? Edison stayed on his knees, watching her pack up her laptop with steady hands. No trembling. No tears. Just the calm competence of someone who'd survived worse than this conversation. I've spent 3 years learning to live without you, Gina said, not looking at him. You can spend the next 3 learning to live with consequences. Seems fair. She walked toward the door. Gina, Dr. Williams, wait. Edison forced himself to stand. Can I see them? Know them? She paused at the door, hand on the handle. They're not pawns in your redemption arc, Edison. They're children. My children. Who've never asked about a father because they've never needed one. But You have no rights here. She turned, and her eyes held nothing but truth. Legal, moral, or otherwise. You signed away your marriage. I signed away your access. That's the deal you made. The door opened. Your presentation is at 3, Gina said. Mine is at 2. I'd prefer we didn't cross paths again this weekend. She left. And Edison Greer, billionaire, medical innovator, the man who controlled life and death with hospital authorizations, collapsed into a chair in an empty conference room and finally, 3 years too late, mourned everything he'd lost. Not just a wife. Not just children. The right to be forgiven. And Edison Greer, billionaire, medical innovator, the man who controlled life and death with hospital authorizations, collapsed into a chair in an empty conference room and finally, 3 years too late, mourned everything he'd lost. The legal letter arrived at Gina's hotel room the next morning. She'd expected it. Men like Edison didn't accept defeat, they hired attorneys to rewrite the rules until losing became winning. Petition for paternity establishment and custodial rights. Gina read it over breakfast while Lila and Lucas colored at the hotel table, blissfully unaware their existence had become a legal battlefield. Mommy, can we see the big buildings again today? Lucas asked, his gray-green eyes bright with excitement. The same eyes currently being claimed in 12 pages of legal documentation. Maybe later, Mayu more. Gina folded the letter, her hand steady. She'd survived worse than lawyers. First, Mama has to make a phone call. By noon, Edison's petition was destroyed. Not by counterarguments or legal maneuvering. By facts. Gina's attorney, a fierce Brazilian woman named Claudia Ramos who specialized in protecting mothers from powerful men, had presented the case with surgical precision. Mr. Greer divorced Mrs. Williams while she was hospitalized with a terminal diagnosis. He denied her access to life-saving treatment under his control. He made no attempt to locate her after the divorce, made no inquiry into her well-being, and assumed death without verification. Under Brazilian law, where the children were born and currently reside, paternal abandonment negates automatic rights. Mr. Greer will need to prove not just paternity, but fitness and prior involvement. He can prove neither. The American family court judge had read the medical records. The divorce papers signed from a hospital bed. The treatment denial documentation. Petition dismissed. Edison tried again the next day. Different court. Different jurisdiction. Dismissed. Then came the gifts. A package arrived at the hotel, matching teddy bears, expensive and impersonal. Gina donated them to the hospital pediatric ward. Designer clothes in the twin sizes. Given to a women's shelter. A trust fund establishment notice, $5 million per child, accessible at 18. Gina's attorney returned it with a single line, "My clients are not for sale." By day 3, Edison changed tactics. He showed up at the hotel lobby. Gina saw him from the elevator, disheveled in a way Edison Greer never appeared in public. Yesterday's suit. No tie. Exhaustion carved into his face like medical records of sleepless nights. He stood when he saw her, hope and desperation warring in his expression. "Please," he said. "Just 5 minutes. I'm not here to fight. I need to see them. Know they're real." Gina's grip tightened on Lila's hand. Lucas pressed against her leg, sensing tension. "Mama, who's that man?" Lila whispered. "The man who denied me treatment. The man who signed divorce papers while I was dying. The man whose DNA you carry but whose love you'll never need." "No one important," Gina said, guiding them past. Edison's face crumpled. "Gina, please." "Dr. Williams," she corrected, not stopping. "And my answer remains no." Day 4 brought the public remorse. Edison held a press conference in the main atrium of his hospital. Gina watched it on her laptop while the twins napped, morbidly curious about how he'd spin this. 3 years ago, I made a decision that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Edison's voice was raw, unpolished. The billionaire veneer stripped away. I let someone I loved suffer because I prioritized business over humanity. I told myself it was about protecting research, about risk management, about the greater good. The cameras captured every flicker of emotion. I was lying. To myself. To everyone. The truth is, I was a coward. I didn't want the complication of a sick wife. The burden. The reminder that money can't fix everything. He paused, visibly struggling. She died believing I'd abandoned her. And I've spent 3 years trying to justify why I let that happen. Gina's hand stilled on the keyboard. But recently, I discovered something that shattered even that delusion. Edison looked directly into the camera. She didn't die. She survived. Against impossible odds, she lived. And I wasn't there. I didn't help. I didn't even care enough to check. The room full of reporters sat in stunned silence. This isn't an apology. Apologies require forgiveness, and I have no right to ask for that. This is a confession. I failed the most basic test of human decency. I chose power over compassion. And now I'm living with consequences I absolutely deserve. He stepped away from the podium without taking questions. The video went viral within hours. Billionaire's shocking admission, medical mogul confesses to abandonment, when money can't buy redemption. Gina closed the laptop. Public remorse was still performance. And she'd stopped believing in Edison's performances 3 years ago. Day 5, Edison tried a different approach. He didn't approach her. Didn't send gifts. Didn't file petitions. He simply existed in proximity. Gina saw him in the hospital cafeteria, drinking coffee alone. In the research library, reading cardiology journals. In the corridor outside the conference rooms, never approaching, just present. Waiting for what? Permission. Absolution. A miracle. The twins noticed. "Mommy," Lucas said on day 6, tugging her coat as they walked past Edison in the lobby. "Why does that man look sad?" Gina's steps faltered. Edison sat in a chair by the windows, staring at nothing. His security detail lurked nearby, but he looked utterly alone. Diminished. Human in a way his billionaire persona never allowed. "Some people are sad because they lost something important," Gina said carefully. "Can we make him happy?" Lila asked, because 3-year-olds still believed kindness fixed everything. "No," Gina wanted to say. He doesn't deserve your kindness. He deserves to understand what loss feels like." But when she looked at her daughter's concerned face, she saw the compassion she'd tried to teach them. The empathy that separated them from men like Edison. "Sometimes people have to make themselves happy," Gina said instead. "We can't do it for them." Lucas considered this. "Is he sick?" "You make sick people happy. A different kind of sick, mais more." They walked on, and Gina felt Edison's eyes follow them. Not predatory. Not entitled. Just broken. That night, alone in the hotel room while the twins slept, Gina stared at the ceiling and faced the question she'd been avoiding. What do the twins deserve? Not what she deserved: revenge, boundaries, the satisfaction of Edison's suffering. What did Lila and Lucas deserve? The truth? That their father had existed all along but hadn't wanted them? Lies? That he'd died, or never existed, protecting them from rejection? Distance? Keep them in Brazil, raise them without complications, let them believe family was just the two of them and Dr. Okafor? Or something more complicated? Something that acknowledged Edison's biology without granting him access. Something that protected them while honoring truth. Gina didn't know. And for the first time since signing divorce papers in a hospital bed, she felt uncertain. Not about Edison. He'd proven exactly who he was. But about whether her children deserved the father he might become, or protection from the man he'd been. The question sat unanswered as she fell asleep. And in the morning, when she woke to Lucas asking, "Is the sad man still here?" she realized. Regret wasn't redemption. But maybe, it was the beginning of accountability. If she let it be. The choice, terrifyingly, was hers. The choice, terrifyingly, was hers. The question came on their last morning in New York. Gina was packing their suitcases, folding tiny clothes while mentally preparing for the flight back to Sao Paulo. Back to their life. Back to the simplicity of a world where Edison Greer didn't exist. "Mommy," Lila said from the window, her small hand pressed against the glass. "Is that man our papai?" Gina's hand stilled mid-fold. Lucas looked up from his coloring book, suddenly interested. "We have a papai." The moment she'd been dreading. The question she'd rehearsed 1,000 answers for, none of them adequate. She sat on the bed, gathering both twins close. Their small bodies fit perfectly against hers, solid, real, hers in every way that mattered. Why do you ask, meu amor? Dr. Okafor said everyone has a mommy and papai, Lucas explained with 3-year-old logic. We have you. But where's our papai? He looks like us, Lila added, still staring out the window. The sad man. He has Lucas's eyes. Gina followed her daughter's gaze. 15 floors below, Edison sat on a bench in the plaza. Waiting. Still waiting. You're very observant, Gina said carefully. Yes. That man is your biological father. Biological? Lucas tested the word. It means you share DNA. You got your eyes from him. Some of your features. Gina touched Lucas's cheek, then Lila's curls. But biology doesn't make someone a parent. Love does. Showing up does. Being there when it matters. Was he there when it mattered? Lila asked. 3 years old and already asking the question that destroyed empires. Gina took a breath, choosing truth over comfort. No, Minha Filha. He wasn't. Why not? Because he made a mistake. A very big one. He chose other things over people he should have protected. Lucas frowned, processing. Did he say sorry? Yes. Then why is he still sad? Because sorry doesn't undo damage, meu amor. Because regret isn't the same as redemption. Because some mistakes echo for lifetimes. But she couldn't say that to a 3-year-old. Because some grown-up problems are complicated, Gina said instead. And saying sorry doesn't automatically make things better. Can we make it better? Lila turned from the window, her expression so earnest it broke Gina's heart. And there it was. The question beneath the question. Not should she let Edison into their lives. But, was she using protection as an excuse for punishment? Was she guarding her children, or guarding her own wounds? Do you want to meet him? Gina asked, though the words tasted like surrender. The twins looked at each other with that silent twin communication that still amazed her. If you think it's safe, Lucas said finally. Safe, the word a 3-year-old shouldn't need to use about meeting his father. But Gina had taught them well. Safety first. Boundaries matter. Love isn't automatic just because someone shares your blood. Okay, she heard herself say. One meeting. Controlled. Short. And if either of you feels uncomfortable, we leave. Deal. Deal, they chorused. Gina pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over Edison's contact. She'd never deleted it. Some part of her had known this moment would come. She typed, 1 hour. Hotel lobby. 2 p.m. Conditions non-negotiable. His response came in seconds, I'll be there. Thank you. No assumptions. No demands. Just gratitude for scraps. Maybe he was learning after all. Edison arrived at 1:45 p.m., early and visibly terrified. He'd dressed carefully, not the billionaire power suit, but simple slacks and a sweater. Trying to look approachable. trying to look like someone worthy of children's trust. He failed. But the effort mattered. Gina met him in a private conference room the hotel had provided. The twins sat on either side of her, Lucas gripping his toy stethoscope like a talisman, Lila holding her stuffed elephant. Edison stood in the doorway, frozen. Just staring at them. "You have 60 minutes, Gina said. No touching without permission. No promises you can't keep. No manipulation. The second I sense discomfort, we're done. Understood?" "Understood." Edison's voice came out hoarse. He stepped inside, carefully, like approaching wild animals that might bolt. He sat in the chair across from them, maintaining distance. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm Edison." "We know," Lucas said. "You're our biological father." A sound escaped Edison, half laugh, half sob. "Yes. I am. Why weren't you there when it mattered?" Lila asked, repeating Gina's earlier phrase with perfect 3-year-old bluntness. Edison's face crumpled. He looked at Gina, silently asking for help. She offered none. He'd wanted this meeting. These were the questions he'd earned. "Because I was scared," Edison said finally, speaking to the twins with unexpected honesty. "Your mommy was very sick. And instead of being brave and helping her, I ran away. I made the worst choice a person can make." "Did you make mommy sad?" Lucas asked. "Very sad." "Did you say sorry?" "Yes. But your mommy is right. Sorry doesn't fix everything I broke." Lila considered this. "Are you going to run away again?" The question demolished him. "No," Edison whispered. "Never again. But I understand if you don't believe me. I have to earn that trust. It might take a very long time." "How long?" Lucas wanted specifics. "Maybe forever," Edison admitted. "And that's okay. Because you deserve someone who shows up, not someone who promises and disappears." Gina watched, her heart a complicated mess of protection and reluctant respect. This wasn't the Edison who denied her treatment. This was someone new. Broken, but maybe learning to rebuild with humility instead of arrogance. "Can you tell us a story?" Lila asked suddenly. Edison blinked. "A story?" "Mommy says stories help us understand complicated things." He looked at Gina, who shrugged slightly. "Your meeting. Your choices." "Okay," Edison said slowly. "Once upon a time, there was a man who had everything. Money, success, people who said nice things about him. But he wasn't actually happy, because he'd forgotten how to care about people more than things." The twins listened, rapt. One day, the most important person in his life needed help. But helping her would be hard. Messy. Expensive. So he said no. He told himself it was the smart choice. Was it? Lucas asked. No. It was the cruelest choice. And when he realized his mistake, it was too late. She was gone. And he'd lost not just her, but something even more precious, the chance to know 2 incredible children. Us? Lila asked. You, Edison confirmed. And now he's trying to learn how to be better. How to earn the right to know you, even though he knows he might never deserve it. That's a sad story, Lucas observed. Yes. But maybe, Edison's voice broke. Maybe it doesn't have to end sad. Maybe if he works very, very hard, and listens, and shows up even when it's hard, maybe someday you'll let him be part of your story. Not as the hero. Just as, someone who's learning. Gina felt tears burning behind her eyes. The hour passed. They talked, carefully, honestly, with Gina guiding the conversation away from anything too heavy. Edison asked about their favorite colors, their games, their dreams. He listened like every word mattered because finally, he understood they did. When Gina said, "Time's up," Edison stood immediately. No arguing. No begging for more. "Thank you," he said to the twins. "For letting me meet you. For being kinder than I deserved. Will we see you again?" Lila asked. Edison looked at Gina. She took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision. Maybe. If your mommy decides it's safe. If he proves he can respect boundaries. If he earns it. "I will," Edison said. Not to her. To the children. "I promise I'll try to earn it." They left him standing in the conference room, and Gina didn't look back. At the airport, Lucas asked, "Mommy, do you think he'll keep trying?" "I don't know, Mayu Amor." "I hope he does," Lila said. "Everyone deserves a chance to be better." Gina pulled them close, these children who'd survived impossible odds and somehow emerged with more compassion than the adults around them. "You're right," she whispered. "Everyone deserves a chance. But chances have to be earned. And some people spend their whole lives learning that lesson." They boarded the plane. Headed home. To the life she'd built from nothing, to the hospital where she saved lives instead of ending them, to a future where Edison might exist on the periphery, supervised, limited, learning humility one supervised visit at a time. Maybe he'd fade away. Maybe he'd disappoint them. Or maybe, just maybe, he'd finally understand that fatherhood wasn't about rights or DNA or money. It was about showing up. Consistently. Humbly. Without entitlement. Gina looked out the window as New York disappeared below them, and thought. Some men lose everything to learn the value of one life. Edison lost 3. Whether he'd truly learned remained to be seen. But for the first time, she was willing to let time provide the answer. So, what did you think? Are you Team Gina, protect those kids at all costs? Or do you think everyone deserves a shot at redemption, even Edison? Here's the thing, this channel doesn't do fairy tales. We do messy, complicated, real human drama where right and wrong aren't always clear. If that's your vibe, subscribe now because we've got dozens more stories coming about second chances, consequences, and the price people pay for their choices. And do me a favor, comment your honest take. Did Edison's public confession change anything for you? Would you let him see the twins? I'm genuinely curious how you'd handle this situation. Your engagement helps this channel grow, and honestly, your perspectives make these stories richer for everyone. So subscribe, comment, and let's keep this conversation going. See you in the next one.